What's up, guys? It's your boys Taylor coming back at you with another episode of the Empirical Scouting Podcast. We are back finally after 4 months with our mock draft 2.0. This is going to be our first mock since the combine and since free agency has started and all the craziness has happened even during the tampering period. We're doing this on March 14th, 2024. So anything that happens afterwards, don't hold us accountable to those picks. Things can change. Mock drafts are very fluid. I'm sure our opinions and picks might even change by the time the draft comes late April. So, Taylor, you ready to begin?
No, I hate mock drafts.
I know. But I'm going to be taking odds this time, and you're going to be taking evens. So, without further ado, let's start it. Hit the jingle, the do. Yeah,
Who are you taking at number one?
With the first pick of the Empirical Scouting Podcast, the Bears are going to just go ahead and select Caleb Williams. We haven't traded Justin Fields yet, but we're not going to risk passing on someone as special as Caleb Williams. Everyone knows this is the pick. There's nothing really else to say. It's Caleb Williams at 1.01.
Yeah, I mean, by every advanced metric that I've ever seen, Justin Fields, for the most part, it does not fit the bill as a franchise quarterback passer. So I think this is the right call. And I guess it's to be determined where he ends up as a backup. Now, moving to the Commanders at 2. I guess we should go ahead and establish that these earlier picks are kind of going based off of consensus, what sounds like is going to happen. And then as we get further into things and things kind of devolve, we'll go kind of more into what our personal opinions are. So
yeah, but in this situation, if you have an opinion out of these two guys, go for it.
Well, so Drake May is definitely my personal QB2, but I can't ignore what the tea leaves seem to be spilling out for me, and I do think that it sounds like and seems like Jaden Daniels is going to be the pick for the Commanders. And just in the interest of keeping things kind of grounded, that is where I'll go. Not necessarily what I would do, but I think the Commanders may be going for a guy that may resemble a former number 2 pick they did once upon a time. So, Jaden Daniels.
Yeah, we got into that in that QB episode. So if you haven't listened to that, go back and check it out because there's some eerily similar things between Jaden Daniels and Robert Griffin III. So with the third pick, on the Patriots, new regime, it's a new era in New England. And when you have a new era, it's hard to, replace Tom Brady. You tried it with Mac Jones. You've had some other things. You brought back, I believe, Jacoby Brissett as well. However, that's not going to tear me away from taking your QB2, Drake May. You need a QB. I know there's thoughts that they might trade back. We're not doing any trades in this mock. So, that could sway some things if we made a trade. But I just don't think taking a wide receiver here, which would be the only other option, in my opinion, would solve issues like finding that quarterback. You can find receivers elsewhere. I know Marvin Harrison is going to be an extremely good wide receiver, but you can find that elsewhere. So I'm going with Drake May out of North Carolina.
Yeah, I think this is actually the pick. Brissett's a great bridge quarterback and mentor type and everything like that. And that signing more so signals to me that it is going to be something like this. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's Jacoby starts week 1 and whoever they take is the starter, a few weeks down the line.
Transition them into a starting role. I think we've seen that happen a lot. And we've seen people sit for a whole year, transition the first half of the year. I think Drake May can step on the field day 1, but you give them, depending whenever their bye week ends up being, you give them to that bye week, or you give them to week 7 or so to just get the feel of things, get your feet wet, maybe get in some plays, some drives, and then, maybe hopefully their bye is week 7, week 8, and just comes out strong after that.
So my interpretation, and maybe a hot take at this point in time, my interpretation of how the rumors have played out, the rumors are that the Patriots want Jaden Daniels, and like if he's not there, they will trade out of the pick. I am interpreting that as smoke screens for them actually wanting Drake May and hoping that it will push Daniels up to the Commanders, just as it's happened here. I think they want Drake May personally, but I might be wrong. Anyways,
Never know.
Moving to the Cardinals, though, in real life, I do think that this is a pick that's going to end up being traded. I think they will trade to the pick to the Broncos or the Vikings for a certain national championship winning quarterback. But since we are doing no trades, I think the only logical pick here is Marvin Harrison Jr., considering that wide receiver room is not very talented, especially after Hollywood's seeming to exit in free agency. Now, they do also have a need at tackle, but I don't think they are going to pass on a prospect like Harrison.
No, I couldn't do it. Like, he's your number one prospect overall. He'd be my number one or number two. So when you're at 4 and you get your arguably the best player in the draft, you have to take it. Even if it's a wide receiver and passing on offensive line, which they need. But moving over to 5 with the Los Angeles Chargers, I just restructured both Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa. So defensive line set. Hopefully, a lot of defenses they need some help on defense. They always need depth because something over there with the Chargers, they are always injured on defense, just ransacked injuries. But I'm Jim Harbaugh. I just come in, I get shiny toy and Justin Herbert. I'm good. We still have Keenan Allen for now. We just drafted Quentin Johnson. I need someone to protect him. I think it's a no-brainer pick. I am going to go with Joe Alt, a guy day one starter on the offensive line, protect Justin Herbert, and will attack needs elsewhere.
I like it. I like Joe Alt. I think he can fit at either tackle position at the next level. Until that they restructured both Bosa and Mack, I was actually under the thought process of this being a Dallas Turner landing spot, and I still wouldn't be surprised if it's they take Turner and do a little 3-man rotation for a year. But I think Alt also makes sense, all things considered.
Yeah, 100%. If you asked me like 2 days ago, this might have been a different pick, or it would have been a harder pick to make. But after both of them restructured, because they were both potentially gone, they were both going to get cut or traded or so. So if they were both gone, 100% I'm going Dallas Turner. But if one of them's there, it'd be a little bit harder.
So the Giants have made some interesting moves this year or this offseason. They've let Saquon walk. They brought in Drew Lock. They brought in a couple of offensive linemen, John Runyon and Illuminor. So it looks like they're not necessarily solidifying the right side of the offensive line, but at least going to have a bridge in the event that like Evan Neal is not even playable next year, which may be the case. And
probably the case.
It kind of seems like Drew Lock may be the potential bridge if they just want to sit Daniel Jones for the season or as much as possible to avoid paying guarantees and move on from him. Now, I don't think the quarterback is truly what they're looking for this offseason or this draft based on this team currently. And I think they need a quarterback. I think we could all agree that Daniel Jones is probably not the guy, but I don't think they're necessarily looking quarterback here. I think that it's a lot of smoke. I think the clear pick is the consensus pick for the most part. I think it's Malik Neighbors. They have not had the best wide receiver talent there to support the quarterback since Odell maybe left, or was since Odell before he had his injuries. And I think Malik Neighbors can maybe give them some kind of option that's going to be a go-to option beyond Darius Slayton and Sterling Shepard and Jalen Hyatt.
Yeah, I was gonna say Jalen Hyatt, and they still have Wendell Robinson, I believe, too.
They do, yeah, but none of them are that.
I'm not. None of those guys are stopping me from taking Malik Neighbors. We talked about it on the wide receiver part 1 episode that I personally am this this close to putting Malik Neighbors as my wide receiver one, and that's not even trying to be a hot take guy. So I like it. But Daniel Jones, it's funny you mentioned they brought in Drew Lock and about he might start because I was looking at the phone earlier and they were talking about how Drew Lock apparently was sold on the idea that he's going to get a chance to compete, actually get a chance to compete for the starting job there. So I don't know what's going to go on there. It might be a little bit rough this year, but when you get Malik Neighbors in, you
Yeah.
figure out the quarterbacks
I just
next
would be
year.
shocked if they actually did try to go get a quarterback early, because then you're
Mhm.
basically making it to where you have to carry 3 quarterbacks. And I know Locke, they could
Yeah,
technically cut Locke because it's a 1-year
no, but
deal.
you can't trust it.
I don't see Locke being a preseason cut. And Daniel Jones, you can't necessarily cut him right now.
Nope.
So unless you're telling me they plan on making Daniel Jones straight up a healthy scratch, or the third QB alternate in the event of injuries thing that they do now, I can't imagine they're going to go quarterback in round 1.
Yeah. No, I can't. I can't see it. And they did just beef up the defensive side of the ball, especially along the defensive line. So that's not necessarily a need right now. Their defense was actually pretty solid last year as well. It's just their offense couldn't do anything. So we'll move over to number 7, the Tennessee Titans. Shockingly, just signed Calvin Ridley to an absolutely absurd deal, in my opinion. Uh, yeah, it's a weird one. It came out of nowhere. Saw that funny tweet about how they were what plus 1,200 to sign him. And out of nowhere, Calvin Ridley signs with them instead. So it's just funny. He obviously wasn't betting on it. It's just fun to joke around about. But you did get it. You have some solid receivers. Will Levis showed promise. He actually did better than I thought he would do. I was just totally out on Will Levis. Defense is always solid. I know they got pieces going in and out, but in this situation, it looks like I'm focusing on offense, and I desperately need to protect Will Levis. I A clean pocket is going to be his best friend. Obviously, he can move around, but he's not, he's not Jaden Daniels. He's not Justin Fields. Like he's not going to be able to do that. So I'm going to take the best tackle that's still on the board, and that's just going to be Olu Fashanu. In my opinion, there's obviously talk about another tackle that could be right up there with him, if not better. I'm not personally ready to be sold on that. I'm also not a tackle or offensive line expert by any means, but just watching Olu the few times I have, it's just he's a solid guy that I know I just fit on my line right now.
Yeah, I like Olu. I haven't gotten all the way to offensive tackle yet, but I think it's kind of surprising based on prior games I've seen how low it feels like people are on him.
I never hear
So
people talk about him anymore.
yeah, it's weird. It may be one of those signs, though, that truly the NFL is actually likes him more than we realize, because
Mhm.
they're not having to do anything about him, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. But my
Pressure's on now.
yeah, I mean, I'm sprinting the card in here, truthfully,
Yeah.
if I'm running things and I'm picking Jared Verse. The Falcons have not had a good pass rusher since John Abraham.
Yep.
And Dallas Turner represents a very high upside, but I have seen the Atlanta Falcons take that high upside opportunity a few times and miss
Yep.
completely. I
That's
would like
my
a good
biggest worry as a Falcons
I would
fan.
like a good floor. I don't care if he's a 14 sack, ceiling, but give me 8 sacks a year and I'm happy. Which is that's a high ask still, but like just consistently a guy that will get some pressure and do his job well, and I'll be happy. Jared versus my edge 1, and I have confidence that he can play, in the system. He can play the run, and that he can, get pressure on the quarterback consistently. So Jared versus it
Yeah.
is.
I mean, I would like it, obviously, as we're both Falcons fans. I mean, him or Dallas Turner. I know a lot of people are a lot higher in Dallas Turner. We live in the South. Dallas Turner is a Bama guy. A lot of Bama people are in Atlanta and the state of Georgia. So I love it. I would absolutely love it. The Dallas Turner thing does scare me a little bit. It seems like we're taking like that Vic Beasley or, just based off athletic traits and he might not put it all together. I think Dallas Turner is going to be a lot better than Vic Beasley was, even, if you include that one Super Bowl run year. But we'll move on to number 9, back up with the Bears. I just took Caleb Williams. Yes, I still have Justin Fields, but I'll worry about that later. And I've made a lot of defensive signings this, last season, during the season, and then this off season so far, free agency. There's a couple guys I like on the board right now, and there's 2 guys I'm debating right now that'll both help me out. However, I talked to one Bears fan, and he said he would be on board with taking Brock Bowers even with this the signings. This was before the Gerald Everett signing, so I'm no longer taking or even considering Brock Bowers. But yeah, I know. But they signed Gerald Everett along with having Cole Kmet, so tight end's not going to be a place I'm going to attack right now. So I'm just going to go with our wide receiver three, a guy who's going to be very safe, very has athleticism. Line him up with DJ Moore, and you got it right. It's Roma Dunze.
Yeah, I like it. Give Caleb something to work with. And Odunze can play to Caleb's tendencies, I guess. He can play where, he keeps working when the quarterback is moving around and gets open. And I think he works well with DJ as a thunder, almost to DJ's lightning for the wide
Yep.
receivers.
They do different
And
things.
yes, and so moving with the Jets, I'm gonna go with just what we've heard very very often. Talise Fuaga has been heavily connected to the Jets. There's a lot of rumors that apparently the Jets love him or high on him. So they need a left tackle. I don't know if I necessarily am confident Fuaga's a surefire tackle at the next level, but um, I'm gonna go with what the rumors are, the consensus are here before I kind of go off the rails.
Yeah, I can see it. I mean, they might, and of course, David Bakhtiari is now a free agent, so he's probably going to end up in New York. Let's just be real; he's Aaron Rodgers' best friend, but they still need offensive help and offensive lineman help, I should say. They probably need another receiver or two as well, but they can attack that later on. So I like the pick. Moving to number 11 with the Minnesota Vikings. This is a pick that's probably going to get traded up, but since we're not doing trades again, like we said, they're going to land the same guy that they're going to get now. Obviously, Kirko is now an Atlanta Falcon. They need someone to throw the ball. Sam Darnold's not going to be the guy. I refuse to believe that Justin Jefferson is going to take receive passes from Sam Darnold for 17 games. So I will take a guy who might have, like we talked about with Drake May, sit for a couple games, but will slowly take over. And that's going to be a guy who you might actually take above Drake May personally, and that's going to be JJ McCarthy.
Yeah, I like this pick. I think JJ fits what they are trying to do there offensively. And I think it's a good landing spot situation where he can sit behind Darnold. Like we had talked about with Drake May and Jacoby, he could sit behind Darnold for a period of time, even the full year if needed, and kind of represent the next step for this franchise. And I think it fits stylistically. Like JJ McCarthy, I literally compared him to a faster, more athletic Kirk Cousins type of player. So all in all, I think this would work out pretty well. Now, the Broncos are up with me, and you have left me in a very, very tough situation because the Broncos would also be a team that would take JJ McCarthy, in my
And like
opinion.
you said, this is why that Arizona pick really, really might get traded, because you have these two teams and even the team after them that all could be, hoping to jump up to that 4 spot, if not, 5 or 6, whatever. But they want all three of these next teams are going to be wanting, or the Vikings and the next two teams are all going to be possibly wanting JJ McCarthy. So, or Drake May, whichever one ends up happening. But in this sense, it's JJ McCarthy.
Yes, and I think it's going to be a bidding war between Vikings and Broncos specifically. Truthfully, I think the Raiders are going to go a different direction, but the Broncos, it's very very tough for me here. I want to do a few things, but I think what makes the most sense to me internally is Quinyon Mitchell. And I'm not necessarily saying I would pick him this high, but I think when you consider the athletic profile of this guy and look at the rest of the roster for the Broncos, there's not really anybody that I would love next to or opposite of Patrick Surtain. And when you get a hyper athletic, very long corner that you can take, especially when there's not a quarterback I'm willing to take this high, I think this is probably the right pick. The only other consideration I may have would be Dallas Turner, but they don't necessarily need edges as much. I mean, they do, but they don't. So
Yeah,
I don't know.
I get the feeling. I mean, Quinion just is been rising up draft boards like crazy. Yeah, that Senior Bowl, the Combine. I'm sure Pro Day is going to be all over, and even though it's just in Toledo, like everyone's going to be there. So I can see it. He's a lot of people. I've heard actually surprising amount of people that he's their cornerback one. So I don't hate the pick. That just athletic freak that he is. You put him next to Pat Sertan. Wow, I was forgetting his name. You put him next to him, and that's going to be a shutdown secondary, and you can figure it out from there. So moving to 13 with the Las Vegas Raiders. This Quinion was the guy that I was targeting for them. Another team that needs a quarterback. Not really going to address it here necessarily. We did just pay Gardner Minshew, so worst comes to worst, he did just take the Colts to the playoffs. So I think I can roll with him for a year if I absolutely need to. We did also sign Christian Wilkins, so Max Crosby has a guy who can run next to him. So Dallas Turner is a option here for me, just to get after the quarterback, and a secondary's best friend is just an insane pass rush, and that would be absolutely insane. But I'm just going to attack the secondary with a lot of the consensus, I would say, cornerback one, but they're pretty much A, B in this situation. I'm just going to go Terrion Arnold. He's a guy that I desperately need secondary help. I mean, right now I have Jack Jones and Trayvon Mulray as my starters. So, you bring Terrion Arnold in there, help shut down the one side of the field, and you let Max Crosby and Christian Wilkins do their thing.
Yeah, I mean, overall, so I think that actually is a interesting landing spot for Arnold, or Mitchell, whoever they had. I think so. I think
Yeah.
corner or tackle is what the Raiders really need to do here. You get a corner that's playing opposite of Jack Jones. Jack Jones is supremely talented, if we're being honest. It's just he's not necessarily reliable personality wise. That's part of, or he didn't fit in with New England personality wise. And then
he's
Nate
good.
Hobbs, and he makes plays. And then they have Nate Hobbs in the nickel, who's a very talented corner too. So then you add in another guy that can play opposite of them, and it really works really well. The other option would be a right tackle. And like I said, I think when it's all said and done, I won't be surprised if Justin Fields is in Las Vegas.
Yeah,
he may not be the starter immediately, but I think this is probably, especially since Seattle just made a move to get Sam Howell, I think this is a likely landing spot still for them.
My feeling. My feeling is that Justin Fields will be in Las Vegas come week 1. That's the way I'm personally just operating, like mentally. Like I'm like, he's going to be there eventually. Especially Seattle was the team that I really thought, but as soon as they made the trade for Sam Howell, which was probably less expensive than trading for Justin Fields, at least right now, they pulled the trigger there. So I think they're out, and he'll be a Raider.
We'll talk about Sam Howell further here in a second, because I have a thought. But for the Saints can go a few different ways. They just cut Michael Thomas. They could use wide receiver talent. They could use offensive line talent, and they could use some, pieces on the defense. I think overall, though, what I'm going to go with for the Saints is almost a little shocker here, because it is a kind of against what people may think, but I'm going to go with a big X receiver for them to add to their offense, to play opposite of Chris Olave. So it gives Derek Carr a little bit more, weapons to work with. Hopefully you're getting a guy that can be an elite wide receiver down the road as well, and you're making potentially one of the best wide receiver duos in the league. You're still committed to Carr for this year and maybe next year. I don't know off the top of my head for that, because of your cap situation. And I don't want to draft a tackle that I'm not confident is going to be able to play left tackle for them right now. So my thought is I'm going to come back. I would come back around and get a left tackle in round 2 or earlier if I have to trade up.
I can see it. And I mean, we talked about it also in the Wide Receiver Part 1 episode, how much I love AD Mitchell. How much you actually do love him, it's just as a major red flag. But if you're interested in that red flag, go check out that episode. So we'll move over to 15 with the Indianapolis Colts. Your boy AR is going to be back and healthy. They have Joe Flacco just in case now. So, their defense, they always, yeah, they always tend to have a solid defense, even if it's guys that you don't really know about. Just that whole culture there, defense on the defensive side of the ball is just really solid. We've seen that. They've spent a couple mid-round picks on wide receivers and getting weapons in. I believe they just extended Michael Pittman, if I'm not mistaken. I know they franchise tagged him, but I'm pretty sure
they did. I think a 3-year deal.
Okay, so they have Michael Pittman, and obviously they have Alec Pierce still, and they just drafted Josh Downs. But I need to give another weapon, and it's funny because I've always joked about how the Seahawks had just a revolving door at tight end. It was just insert random player here catching a touchdown. I feel like Indianapolis Colts are very close to that. I mean, Jelani Woods, Kylan Grayson, Mo Alley Cox, Will Malloy, or Mallory from Miami, if I remember that rookie. Yes. He was pretty solid. Not one of those guys can sniff Brock Bowers' talent. I could cut them all right now. And it's not a team that's really been connected to Brock. This is more of what I would do if I was sitting there at 15 with Brock Bowers on the board. He could block. Yeah, I think there's been issues, quote unquote, issues, I guess you could call it, with his size, that he's not as big as people thought. I don't know how big people thought he was. Maybe they just weren't really paying attention. But he's exactly the size that at least Georgia fans have always known. He's a good blocker. He's not obviously going to be necessarily like a George Kittle, but he's a very, very, very solid blocker. And obviously we all know what he can do with the ball in his hands. So I think you get that underneath, secondary option, in my opinion, to Michael Pittman for AR to target, because he's also not a receiver or a tight end that can only catch within 5 or 10 yards. And we've talked about in the past with AR, his touch closer to the line of scrimmage needs to be worked on. Obviously, we didn't really get to see it that much this past year, and I'm sure he's been working on it. But this is a guy that you can throw the ball 15, 20 yards downfield and, rely that he's going to bring it down. So I'm going with Brock Bowers to just boost up that offense.
I like it a lot, actually. I think I think he likes throwing to tight ends. And I think getting a reliable tight end in there, especially with a young quarterback too, because tight ends are often a kind of safety blanket for them, is a good move. Now for the Seahawks, my Sam Howell thought is, I just think it's kind of funny because in many ways, Sam Howell kind of can resemble Russell Wilson. And I know Pete's not there anymore, but Schneider still is. And I'm not saying Howell's about to be the next Russell Wilson. It's just humorous to me how they moved on from Russ and then went and got a similar sized quarterback, similar play style quarterback in a lot of ways.
It's really very similar when you think about it. I didn't I guess I should have realized it because I once owned him in fantasy, but I didn't realize he had 4,000 yards passing. It wasn't
Howell or Russ?
Howell.
Oh yeah, I mean, but
it wasn't pretty at all.
The ball nonstop. It felt like.
But it wasn't pretty. But he had 4,000 yards, and I don't know, dump. I mean, obviously, when you have the number 2 pick and you don't believe in your quarterback, you dump him. But it's just weird. A 4,000-yard rookie quarterback got traded for that cheap.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's. I don't want to necessarily say Howell is this guy or not this guy, but it's almost the Gardner Minshew type thing, right? Where Minshew showed a talent that he may be a top 32 quarterback in the league, but he's not a top 20 quarterback in this league probably. No. And how much you don't want to necessarily waste time trying to build around that, because that's how you end up how the Falcons have been in the last few years, how the Bengals felt like forever until they got Burrow and things like that. But with the Seahawks here, they really need an interior offensive line. I don't want to take an interior offensive lineman here. And there's a glaring player dropping on this board that I want to go ahead and snag because I think he fits this team well. He fits the new head coach there well, the defensive system, and that's Dallas Turner. I think it's an absolute steal and a slam dunk pick for the Seahawks. And then we'll have to circle back around and address the offensive line later in the draft.
Yeah, no, I mean, if Dallas Turner fell to 16, which I don't think would necessarily happen at all in real life, but in this one it did, that yeah, they would be sprinting in. I mean, Dallas Turner is just, they need him, but that just seems such like a Seattle pick to me. And they would turn him in. I know Pete Carroll's not there anymore, but just that culture, I would just trust that they turn him into something special. At 17, it makes pick a little bit easier for me. Not only because you just took Dallas Turner, because if I'm at 17 at Jacksonville, I'm staring at him like, how is he still available? I need him. However, hours ago, they just signed Eric Armstead to that defensive line. They obviously still have Josh Allen for at least one more year. Obviously the outside linebacker, not the quarterback, and they still have oh my gosh, so bad. I can't remember his name. Trayvon Walker. He's a Georgia guy, and I couldn't remember his name, but I'll go to the grave saying that I was pounding the table for Aiden Hutchinson. Imagine this team with Aiden Hutchinson and Josh Allen. Like it would be
absolutely. Oh, I was
100%
with you.
Yeah, no, I know. I think most people really were, but that's a different story. We've talked about that before. So with Jacksonville, there's two ways I can go. Still honestly debating it, but for me, I'm going to go with another plug and play guy on the offensive line. I need to protect Mac Jones. No, I'm just kidding. I got to protect Trevor Lawrence. I thought about wide receiver here because honestly, they don't really have anyone too special in my opinion. They obviously don't have Calvin Ridley, and they still wanted him. But I'm not. I'm going to address it later. So we'll go J.C. Latham, a guy who can just plug into the offensive line. I pretty much need. I can use an upgrade at all the positions necessarily. So I'm just going to go with the best guy available with J.C. Latham. And that was
I agree with your pick. And J.C. Latham would have been my pick at 18 if you took Amarius Mims. Or you didn't.
They were flip flopping. Obviously, a little biased with Amarius, but I would still take JC over.
Yeah, I think
like
JC's
a pro ready
guy right now, and I sprinted in obviously with Mims for the Bengals. I think I want to say Jonah Williams has officially signed elsewhere. I don't know off the top of my head where he signed.
I'm like 90% sure.
Yeah, they need a right tackle in my eyes. I think Amarius Mims, he's there's not a lot of game experience on tape right now, but you don't see players that move the way he does at his size very often. It's a risk due to injuries. We've seen guys that big and that athletic deal with injuries. Mekhi Becton's an example, but I think you take the swing here. Hope that you can have an elite bookend right tackle to protect Burrow further. Easy pick for me.
Yeah, and it's just funny because ever since they got Burrow, I think every mock draft I've ever done, the Bengals have always selected an offensive tackle outside of when Jamar Chase, they had the chance to get Jamar Chase. So we'll move to 19 with the Los Angeles Rams. Another thing that there's two guys I have in mind. They kind of need, I believe they lost Leonard Floyd. They had Leonard Floyd last year, right?
No, Floyd was in Buffalo.
Oh yeah, he was in Buffalo. Why did I think that was 2 years ago? Anyway, they definitely need help at edge. Get after the passer. Aaron Donald's getting up there in age. He can't do it alone as much as he used to back in the day. However, I am going to attack the defensive side of the ball in a different capacity. They just signed Darius Williams from Jacksonville. However, the cornerback technically projected to start as it sits right now is your favorite cornerback in the world, Darion Kendrick. We had those arguments last year. So I will draft an upgrade from him. And that's going to be a guy who could possibly not even play that same position. He might push back into safety. However, I think after watching it, you can play him at cornerback, and we're going to go Cooper DeJean.
Yeah, I agree with this pick. Actually, I was a little worried when you started talking about edge rusher, to be honest, because I really think that you know corner or secondary is what they need. Because I do think they have a little bit of talent at edge that they can work with, especially when
They
you
just
have
got
Aaron
Kobe
Donald in the
Turner
middle.
last year.
Yeah, yeah. So I agree with this pick. I don't know if I necessarily would have gone Dejean, but I can't
Yeah.
say it's wrong. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's one of those things where it's like tomato, tomato. I think Dejean's a really
Mhm.
great player, and I think he could bring a lot of value to the Rams. The Steelers, it's the Steelers are just so fun. There's a few different things that we could do with them. I think it's pretty clear they need wide receiver help after dealing Deontay Johnson. Um, I mean, they still have George Pickens, who Pickens can be a top tier type of receiver. Um, but I just don't know if he's going to let himself. I feel like gets in his own way in many
We've seen it. We've
ways.
seen it ever since Georgia.
Yeah, and I truthfully I am surprised at some of his actions in some ways since he's gone pro. I know he did some things at Georgia on the field during games, but he was typically like it was like he was well behaved in the sense that he wasn't selfish on the field for Georgia.
No.
He blocked, he played hard, and then he sprayed water and he got like in a fight one time. Like that's the
Yeah.
things on the field that
It
happened.
was more immaturity than,
Yes.
being a me guy.
This since he's been in Pittsburgh has been the diva, like I want the
Yeah.
ball, throw me the ball, whether we're winning or not. I want the touchdown. I don't care if it's bad for the team. And that's the surprise I have, and he doesn't he's not blocking hard on plays. We've seen the clips go viral. He was a great run blocker at UGA. So I don't know what's changed. And I don't know if that's just a testament to how good of a coach Kirby Smart is for the culture they have there. But I'm going to go ahead and give them Brian Thomas here at 20. I think he's the best wide receiver left on the board. I think it lets them I think Brian Thomas can play on the outside, George Pickens can play on the outside, and it gives them just more talent to work with. And hopefully Brian Thomas doesn't become a diva.
Yeah. No, I mean, he hasn't shown signs of that in the past. He obviously shared a field with the
You never know with Pittsburgh
Yeah, I
wide
guess.
receivers.
Yeah. I mean, we never thought Julio Jones would become a diva. Then all of a sudden, at the very end of his career here, he seemed to start becoming one. So anything can happen, especially with wide receivers. So we'll move to pick 21 with the Miami Dolphins. There's a lot of things I could do here. There's a edge rusher I really love here that's fallen a little bit, probably due to some medical concerns, but I'm gonna go ahead and pass on because for me personally, I'm also kind of mixing in what I would do. And if I have worries on the offensive side of the ball with Tua already, I don't want to have those same worries on the defensive side of the ball with a guy drafted round one. Sounds weird, but it's just something that you have to consider when you're drafting there. So I am going to boost up my pass rush. I have a really, really tough division. Might now have Drake May in it. We obviously have Josh Allen. Very competitive. Want to boost the defense side of the ball up in a different way. I'm going to go with a guy who's, it's kind of a risky pick because you don't necessarily draft these guys this highly. But I'm going to go Byron Murphy, defensive tackle from Texas. It's very disruptive. Yeah, he's a defensive tackle. I believe they signed someone, but I'm not no one that I'm really worried about. Not one really worried about. But you have Jalen Phillips. You have Bradley Chubb as well. I think Shaq Barrett. But so you have guys that can come around the edge, but I want some pressure from the inside as well. I think that Byron Murphy can not only rush a passer from the inside, but take up blocks and allow those guys who are getting a little bit older up there in age to do what they do best.
Um, I'll just comment on the value aspect that you mentioned
Yeah.
because you were concerned. If it makes you feel somewhat better, I like Byron Murphy a lot, and I have a first round grade on him. And
There you go.
all I'll
Yeah,
say before we do defensive line talk. But for the Eagles, this is an easy, quick pick for me. All I'm doing is looking for who is my top corner available and selecting him. And for me, it is going to be Nate Wiggins. The Eagles secondary, yes, they signed Chauncey Gardner Johnson back,
yeah.
but he's that like nickel safety hybrid. Um, their outside corners are Darius Slay, James Bradbury, both aging, both didn't perform the best last year, and then Eli Ricks, who has a lot of shortcomings to being a top tier corner, despite what it looked like early on in his college career. And then
And it
Keely
was
Ringo,
UDFA anyway.
yes, and then Keely Ringo, who also has some deficiencies that kind of make you concerned for relying on him. Nate Wiggins is a very smooth, long athlete at corner that can play some shutdown coverage. And I think adding him to an already talented, front seven is going to help this defense.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's just a slam dunk. Just the whatever top cornerback is available, that's who Philly is going with. I 100% agree with that pick, and I'm sad because at 23 of the Houston Texans, Nate Wiggins is who I was targeting. It's a I agree. Nate Wiggins would be my next cornerback, and I do think the next guy, who was looked at possibly to be the cornerback one coming in before the season, has kind of fallen off a little bit. However, I still think he's a round one cornerback. I think he can shut down a whole side of the field. He didn't get tested much at Alabama. We're gonna go with Kool-Aid McKinstry. He's gonna have a tandem with Derek Stingley in that back, and that just everything that Houston's doing. They've upgraded so much at all these positions that I am confident that if I insert Kool-Aid on the defensive side of the ball, I can attack, the offensive side later because I already saw my offense rolling this year with a rookie quarterback. So, in my opinion, I would be just confident that it continues to roll into next year and just gets better.
Yeah, I like it. I think it's definitely a good uh, direction to go in. And then the Cowboys are kind of in a tough situation here based on the board. Um, the Tyron Smith left. They could use interior O line. They could use a wide receiver. Gallup may be getting traded. I don't think even if they do trade him, it's not going to be a great return. I don't think Gallup's going to be valued
No,
highly around the league. Brandon Cooks is an aging guy, but he's still talented. And then they obviously have CD, who is a top 10, top 5, whatever you want to label him as. He's a number one wide receiver in the league for sure.
yeah,
For me, I'm thinking I want to go two directions, and I'll straight up, I'm not going to hide the ball here, or three directions, I'll say. I'm not going to hide the ball in these names. Tyler Guyton's one name that comes to mind, but I think Terrence Steele's like a decent right tackle. So I don't know if, Tyler Guyton's the guy that is necessarily going to be their first preference. And then I'm thinking maybe Johnny Newton, who, but they just drafted Mozzie Smith last year, and Mozzie was not great, but do you really want to double dip on a position when, you just took a guy? And then you get a wide receiver option, which I'm thinking almost like Xavier Worthy, and you let him, you get Brandon Cooks there who can kind of work with him a little bit because they're
I
similar
was going to
skill set.
say it would be like a guy Brandon Cooks can teach because they have
Yes.
similar skill
And
sets.
so you're getting Cooks and Worthy on the outside that's going to stretch everything deep. And then you get CD out of the slot. And things are, I can't say things are going to be wide open for CD, but it's going to be harder to defend in my eyes. I really love that idea, but I'm gonna end up going with Tyler Guyton here, um, just because Dallas has their bread and butter for a good while now has been solidifying the offensive line in the first round with very talented players early on, and then building off of that. We saw Tyron Smith get taken very highly by them. They shocked people with Travis Frederick back in the day, Zach Martin, uh, Tyler Smith,
Yeah,
and I think Tyler Guyton's another guy that can be um, a franchise bookend for a good while in that system or in that
yeah.
franchise.
I mean, I agree. I mean, to get back to the ways that they were, which is such a dominant offensive line, would help them out a lot. With Green Bay, kind of sad because Tyler Guy was like the first guy I was looking at, assuming he'd be the best tackle available. He's not. We just lost David Bakhtiari, although he's obviously getting up there in age as well. So we knew it was coming. I'm gonna go offensive line. It's just kind of like with Cincinnati, where it's just you gotta do it. At this point, you have a pretty solid defense and you saw what your offense can do. I'm going to add a guy who could probably play tackle and guard, but all reports saying that he's probably going to get moved inside, and that's going to be Graham Barton. I'm strictly choosing him over Troy Fontenot. That's how you say his name. I apologize if I'm saying it incorrectly. Only because he's bigger, a little bit more athletic.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to fit him in, and he's going to play, one of the 5 positions. I don't know which one, but he's going to be a starter there.
Well, and I'm a big Graham Barton fan going back to the summer. Graham Barton's a very I love Graham Barton. I probably would take him higher than 25 most more often than not in like my own personal valuations. He's got true 5 position flexibility in so many ways, um, which is rare. And there's only 2 other guys I can think of off the top of my head in the league that can maybe pull that off. One of which is a Green Bay Packer in Elton Jenkins. The other one is Elijah Vera Tucker. I think Barton is a plug and play starter for them at any of the positions that they may need him at. Which, off the top
Yeah,
of my head, I believe they've lost John Runyon, so I think right guard may be open for them, and then they lost Bach, so
yeah,
left tackle's potentially open. So I think Barton can play either one just fine. Um, Long term, I don't know if I want him at left tackle due to his length, but I
yeah.
think even if you want to play him at guard and slide Jenkins out for a season or something like that, you can maybe do that because I believe Jenkins played left tackle at some point
I
um,
believe so. Yeah,
in the last couple of years for them with injuries. Um, Moving to Tampa, Tampa's uh, dealing with some changes due to the cap, managing things with having Baker and bringing back Evans and such. They tagged Winfield, I believe, and then they dealt Carlton Davis. So their secondary is shaky right now foundationally. Um, Jamel Dean's still there; he's pretty solid, but I don't know if I would necessarily say like that's a guy I want to build my entire secondary around. Um, the problem becomes I'm not sure there's a corner here that I would value high enough. We just
yeah,
saw
it's tough. I
Kamari
think I
last
think
year.
right now, yeah, I think right now, at least for me, there's 2 corners that would be the clear next 2 for me. But at 26, I'm not sure if I'm willing to use that on them.
Yeah, we saw Kamari last year. His testing didn't seem great from what I saw, which gives me concern, similar to Darion Kendrick a while back.
Mm,
And then I think Rickestraw, however you say his
yeah,
name, his testing I don't think was that great
yeah, his
either.
testing hurt him more than Lassiter's. I'll say that.
Yeah. So my gut instinct for the Bucks is going to swerve to edge. They just took Joe Tryon recently. in the first round, and I believe they also have Yaya Diaby, who is a very raw player, but with a whole lot of upside. Anthony Nelson's a solid rotational guy, but Shoinka has been a I don't disappointment seems harsh, but he's been a disappointment by and large. Um, so my decision is going to be taking Chalk Robinson. When you have pass rush talent off the edge, it creates a whole new game for your defense as a whole. Four guys that you want to rotate in Nelson, Shoinka, or Tryon Shoinka, and then Diaby, and then Chop Robinson now seems like a lot. But it's sooner than you realize Tryon's going to be moving on. Nelson would be moving on. And then you get two hyper athletic guys that you can build with for a few years here with Robinson and Diaby. I like it a lot moving forward for them. I think Robinson's got a very high upside with his explosive ability.
You're taking the upside swing with Chop, just with all the testing and just his athleticism alone. So we'll move it over to Arizona back again at 27. This is, in fact, the team that Jonah Williams did sign with, for reference that we were talking about earlier. So we do have Jonah Williams now. We just drafted Paris Johnson. There's two different ways we can go. However, we mentioned it earlier, where you just attack the wide receiver position, and I still need to protect Kyler Williams. Well, Kyler Murray. And so I am going to just go to the board and so see who is available for that position. And I will go ahead and draft Troy Fontenot, a guy who played tackle. However, people are going ahead and saying that he's going to try to kick inside. We currently have Will Hernandez, former New York Giant, and Elijah Wilkerson at guards. So if he needs to kick inside,
Falcon.
Yep, exactly. If he needs to kick inside, I'm more than willing to let him.
Yeah, they're in an interesting situation with letting Humphreys go.
Yeah.
And but I like the pick. I think he's a good player. I don't know where I'm going to end up having him ranked yet, but I think he's worth this pick. The Bills just signed Curtis Samuel, and I don't know if that's going to prevent me from doing what I want to do here. And I think we all may know what I want to do, just knowing that team. But the other option would potentially be going secondary. But once again, it's secondary talent is not necessarily enticing at this point in time with this at this value. So I'm just gonna say screw it, and I'm going to give the Bills Xavier Worthy in the most cliche consensus landing, one of the two most cliche consensus landing spots. And I'm hoping that we get to see Josh Allen throw absolute bombs to Worthy, similar to how we saw Mahomes throw bombs to Tyreek.
Yeah, I can see it. And I think it would be kind of dangerous, honestly, with his arm. But we'll move over to the Detroit Lions, a surprising team last year that ended up, making it farther than people thought preseason. But they were everyone's dark horse, so I shouldn't maybe say that. Let's see, they signed Carlton Davis, obviously, like we said, from Tampa Bay. We just signed DJ Reader earlier today, I believe, and brought in Marcus Davenport as well to run with Aiden Hutchinson. So we have a pretty solid defense still. Offense, everyone knows how explosive that can be. However, there's one glaring hole, in my opinion, that I've honestly don't know how it wasn't attacked. And that's gonna be wide receiver position. I was kind of thinking about Xavier Worthy if he fell here, even though Jameson Williams is very similar in that sense for them. So I don't have to pick him though because he's obviously not on the board. So it gives me a conundrum because there's a guy that I'm higher on than it seems like a lot of other people. So I'm gonna go ahead and do more of what I would do in this situation rather than what other people would do. And I'm gonna probably skip a couple receivers because this one fits extremely well to me, and that's going to be, oh wow, we have breaking news as I talk real quickly. Um, Keenan Allen traded to the Bears.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
Hypothetically, in this situation, if it
it doesn't really
was
change
to
anything.
like Rome, it would immediately become a very fun,
I would
very
still take
fun.
Rome right now,
It would be
like
a very
knowing.
fun wide receiver trio with Caleb. Um, wow. I'm
Yeah, I
I
know.
mean,
Shocked.
I guess we knew that they had to make like hard decisions with that cap situation,
Yeah,
but everything was indicating that Keenan was not going to be moved. And now the question, two things come to mind. Number one, Quentin Johnson needs to step the F
yeah.
up. And number two, uh, the Chargers are going to draft Malik Neighbors at 5.
That's what that was my first thought. Is like now I think they would probably draft like neighbors, but we were doing this mock before that, so let's just continue this, and we could talk about our final thoughts on Keenan Allen. It just happened to come across my screen, and I was like, "Whoa, wait a second, I gotta say something." So back to Detroit. Like I said, speaking of wide receivers, it's gonna be a pick that I would personally do more so than maybe a lot of others. And what I've seen is I am going to skip down the wide receiver board a little bit and go with Xavier Leggett. It's a little bit of a later riser, and a lot of people like to see that early breakout age. It took him a little bit to really understand the position. I believe he's another guy that I don't think he started football late, but I think he started being a wide receiver late. Then he stepped in with
Um,
South Carolina in an interesting setting, I should say. So it took him a while to really learn the nuances of the position. Is that correct?
so what it is he played wide receiver for like a couple years in high school, and then his last year of high school, he was a quarterback, and then he came to
That's it.
South
Yeah.
Carolina as a wide receiver. So he kind of like never really he didn't play wide receiver full time in high school. I think he was more so a quarterback,
Yeah.
and then
Because I
when he
needed
got
him.
to South Carolina, they're like, okay, you're gonna be a wide receiver. So he's still learning the nuances of the game or of the
Mhm.
position. Um, I was truthfully thinking about Leggett at 30 for the Ravens, but I was hesitating on it because, like, do I want to really select another round one wide receiver for
Yeah,
Baltimore?
no.
Um,
I think I was looking it up earlier because I saw a tweet talking about like smart teams never draft a running back, wide receiver, tight end in the first round. I was like, I'm pretty sure almost every team has done at least one of those in the last 10 years. And lo and behold, most of them have. But has selected 4 first round receivers in the last 10 years. Kind of bad.
yeah. So I mean, running back and tight end, I can justify that
Yeah, I
reasoning.
get it.
The other one is off ball linebacker and the interior defensive lineman. Those are like the four wouldn't necessarily want to go after in the first round for the most part. I think saying you don't go after a wide receiver in round one is a
Yeah,
little.
that's yeah,
I think that is more so a principle that you were going by in the early 2000s than in the 2020s,
yeah,
truthfully. But
yeah.
I can't
But for
justify
me,
another one for
yeah.
Baltimore.
Yeah, real quickly with Leggett, I just want like this size and speed combination. There's about 2 receivers I like ahead of him. However, in this situation, when I have Amon Ra, I don't want a similar type of receiver or size, so I'm going with a bigger guy. And frankly, I'm not trusting Jamison Williams either. So that was my explanation for Xavier
No,
Leggett to
yeah,
Detroit.
I do like it. I do like it fit wise. I think it makes sense. It gives the Lions a true X receiver to play, and then you get Amon Ra in the slot, and then you can play Jameson Williams at the Z, and
Yeah,
it it lets it rounds out that receiving core with Laporta. It makes that
yeah,
offense very high powered if Goff is playing good.
yeah.
Now
And I
with
think that's
Baltimore,
the thing is you want to surround Goff with more talent because how long is he
yeah,
going to do this for?
yeah. Now Baltimore, I'm gonna go ahead and grab this guy that was sliding that we were concerned about. And I kind of forgot about him for a few picks there. And I think it fits perfectly with Baltimore's MO of they always just somehow end up with these great players that slide to them.
Yep.
I'm going to go ahead and let Latu come off the board. They had some turnover on defense this offseason. They cut Tyus Bowser, I believe. And Ojabo's there, and they have Owe still off the edge. But Owe's been up and down, and Ojabo, I don't know how he's been overall since coming back from the injuries. So Latu allows them to bring in a very high effort, polished player that I think would fit in well with their culture.
Yeah, I mean, we've said it for years now. Just somehow Baltimore always just drafts one of the best players in the draft that just falls to them. So it's just another example of that. I had my eye on Latu for a couple of the guys, but it's just I didn't really want to. I had other positions I needed to attack for the teams I was covering. So my last team, 31, the San Francisco 49ers. Really obviously exciting team. Some question marks. I don't know if we're going to trade Brandon Ayuk, for instance. I don't personally see why they would, unless he's just demanding an extension or more money, and we just don't want to give it to him. But that's something for the cap guy to handle. So I personally am. I'm gonna stay on the offensive side of the ball. There's a position that, at least only because I know a San Francisco fan, that 49er fans were screaming to go out and pay. However, we have not done that because it seemed like the market was going absolutely crazy. There's two guys I'm looking at right now. I'm not really familiar with him. So I am going to do a guy who's fast rising. He's probably going to get drafted higher than this, but he's another guy who is in a position that first round kind of, iffy to draft. We're going to go with Jackson Powers Johnson out of Oregon, the center. I need probably interior offensive line. So obviously there's another direction I could have gone. However, I think JPJ's talent is on a different pedestal than the rest of the guys that are still available. So I'm going to go ahead and solidify my center position with Jackson Powers Johnson.
I like Jackson Powers Johnson, truthfully. He was a big projection going into this year. Preseason, he was my number 5 overall interior offensive lineman. And I think that caught some of people in the online community off guard. But there was a lot to like there. And I think I feel justified now. And I just wanted to throw that out there. But I like the pick overall for San Francisco. I think, secondary and in offensive line are two, spots they could use talent upgrades at. Shanahan's a wizard at getting a lot of production or a lot of, good play out of players that aren't necessarily amazing talents at those kind of spots. But I think Jackson Powers Johnson can do a lot to help them. The Chiefs, to round it out, I'm going to go with a little – yeah. We all would love Xavier Worthy, but I picked him for the Bills. I'm gonna go. There's two guys I'm kind of considering right here, but I'm gonna go with the one I think would be a little bit more fun, and it might be a little shocker, but I'm going with Malachi Corley.
Okay.
Corley is the easiest way I can describe him without going forever is he gives me a lot of Deebo Samuel vibes. He played running. He was recruited as a corner and a running back out of high school. He went to Western Kentucky to play corner. They converted him wide receiver, so he's still near the position. But the guy plays wide receiver out of the slot. Over 90% of his snaps from the slot in college. Once he gets the ball in his hands, he plays like a running back, truly, because he used to be a running back. Him and Malik Neighbors are in a tier of their own in terms of their ability after the catch in this draft. And with the assumption or acting under the assumption that Hollywood Brown is indeed going to sign with Kansas City, like rumored. Um, you get Hollywood Brown on the outside. You get Rashee Rice, who I think can play inside and out, and then you get Malachi Corley, who can play inside. And all of a sudden, Patrick Mahomes has a very, very fun wide receiver core to work with again. Guys that can make plays on their own and can make things happen after the catch. Um, you know, you at basically all I can say is like envision a Debo Samuel playing with Patrick Mahomes, and there's a lot that Pat Mahomes can do and Andy Reid can do with a player like that.
Yeah, I can see it. He's a guy I like. First round, maybe. Obviously, you're going for a more fun option, and a guy who could really fit that offense. But that's
So
yeah,
philosophically, once you get to the bottom, 10 to 12 picks in the first round, to me, you're more so looking for upsides, plays, and guys that you would want a fifth year from,
yeah,
or cheaper fifth year typically, because there's not, like we've mentioned earlier, there's not 32 first round graded players. There's usually between 10 to 20 at most. So you're getting these guys all in a similar tier at this point. And why not take the swing on a position that typically gets paid more and is more valuable to your offense that you can control on a cheaper contract for a few years, especially when you have a
yeah.
very expensive quarterback.
Yeah, I can see it. Like I said, that's gonna wrap up this mock draft. There's a couple guys that are still on the board that might have gone. We got like Johnny Newton, Keon Coleman, Bo Nix, Michael
Oh my lord,
Penix.
who's picking Keon Coleman this high?
I know. Lad McConkey. I'm scrolling
Lad,
through a
Lad
list.
was the other
Yeah,
guy.
I
It
figured
was him
so.
and Malachi I was between.
Yeah. So there's just some talent out there. Got Patrick Paul Kingsley. I don't want to say his last name because I'll mess it up. And Jordan Morgan. Some other guys in
Suleiman.
the yeah, I can't say it. I've tried. But there's some guys still available that high in round two. That's usually how it works. There's some guys that fall because of these upside plays late in round one. But real quickly before we wrap it up, what we touched on earlier with the news with Keenan Allen. Um, so officially with Keenan Allen going to the Bears, I just want to do real quickly at 5. No longer Joe Alt, in your opinion? Would you take Malik Neighbors in this situation?
I think you go ahead and take Malik Neighbors.
And then if I
You,
would have taken Malik Neighbors, who are you taking as the New York Giants? That was going to be my follow up question to that because that's what I'm really interested in. The Chargers are in a great spot in that situation where they could take Joel, arguably the best offensive lineman in the whole draft, or Malik Neighbors, in my opinion, possibly the best receiver in the whole draft. But now you're with the Giants, and it's like, do I just take Joe Alt in that situation,
I don't think you take Joe Alt if you're the Giants, just because you've
or do you
spent
take Rome?
money on bringing in offensive linemen, and then you all have Evan Neal too. So it's like, unless Evan Neal is straight up okay with playing left guard, which from all things we've heard, he's like not interested in playing guard.
Yeah.
Um, I wouldn't take Alt necessarily.
So
My
you taking Rome?
my instincts go to Rome initially, um, or potentially if you truly do value quarterback, the way that they've been talking would be JJ if he actually gets there.
Yeah.
But like we've mentioned, JJ we think is going to go 4.
Yeah. That
Um,
makes sense.
the other guy I would maybe say is Brock Bowers, due to the fact that we've already heard apparently Waller's considered retirement. Waller's had a tough time in his personal life. It seems like the last few months.
Yeah.
I believe he's had some issues there. So, and I think Brock Bowers provides a good receiving option still for your offense.
I agree. I mean, that's why I drafted him for Indianapolis. But yeah, I was just curious to see who he would take at 6 with New York because it kind of puts them. Because I think Malik Neighbors is the same slam dunk. Just turn the card. You can turn it now. I don't think anyone's going to really jump you for Malik Neighbors. But if he's gone because LA now needs a receiver, which they definitely do, I just was curious who you would take.
I mean,
Well,
the other option would be trading back, which we didn't
yeah,
do trades here,
yeah,
but
yeah.
theoretically, you could always like just say
If
Arizona
Arizona didn't, yeah,
4. You
yeah,
could trade back
that's
to
the thing.
Minnesota or Denver and
That's the
recoup
thing. Yeah,
value.
if Arizona doesn't trade 4, then you're probably the next pick. Because I don't think LA is going to trade back. Personally, I think they're going to take either Joel or Malik Neighbors. And then New York kind of could be like, okay, we don't no longer have Malik Neighbors. There's a little bit of a gap to Rome Odunze. Let's trade back and just either take best available at the sad situation because they need, let's
You,
face it, a lot of help outside of edge.
you also get a situation where you become immediately primed to do a trade back with a team like the Jets who
Mhm.
or the Raiders who would be probably looking for offensive tackle talent. And all of a sudden, the number one offensive tackle in the draft could be falls to your spot. You don't necessarily need offensive line, or you don't want to necessarily invest another high pick on offensive line right now. So you auction the pick off to whoever wants to go get their number one offensive tackle.
Yeah, that's something that I always talk about with the Falcons too. Like if we wanted to trade back, we could, obviously you're not going to get Joe Alt, but there's another guy you want potentially, depending on how the board falls. Uh, that offensive tackle 2 might be there at 8, and if you're New York or I don't know, say Denver, even moving back towards the Bengals, like if you really want that guy, you might want to trade up. So in this situation, that'd be a perfect trade. But that obviously happened while we were drafting, so we're not going to count Keenan Allen. We'll do that next time, but that's going to wrap up this mock draft 2.0 post combine and in the middle of free agent edition. We're obviously going to see many changes from this. As more free agents sign, hopefully not during a draft next time, and more trades are going to occur inevitably. So that's always the fun thing with these things. I know sometimes you hate them, but mock drafts are just fun to do. It's just you try to do different every now and then instead of go the consensus outside the top 3 because everyone knows the top 3, how the top 3 is going. But yeah, if you go ahead and follow us on social media at empirical_scout. If you're listening to us on Spotify, go ahead and give us a 5-star rating. And if you're watching us on YouTube, go ahead and click the like and subscribe button below. For Taylor, I'm Taylor, and this was our mock draft 2.0. Peace.
1, 2,